Welcome to Annotations to Art, Politics, and Life Itself. My name is Nico Heller. My guest today is Yvon Ngassam. Yvon is based in Douala in Cameroon and combines traditional and contemporary media both to explore urban transformations and to confront the enduring legacies of slavery, colonial history, displacement, and migration. By combining traditional methods like etching and embroidery with contemporary technologies such as NFTs, Yvon challenges conventional notions of medium specificity and critically examines cultural heritage, identity, and power dynamics in post-colonial societies. He's exhibited widely, both in his native Cameroon and internationally, including in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Now, Yvon joins me from Cameroon, and I can see that he's already arrived, so do let me invite him in. Yvon,
Hello,
hello. Can you,
hello. Yeah,
you can hear me. I'm so glad
yes,
you're here. Thank you very much for taking time. I have already briefly introduced you, so let's go straight into the dialogue. I know you're in the middle of two exhibitions, so maybe towards the end of our dialogue, you might be able to give us a little pitch and tell us what you're planning and where. So maybe there might be local listeners in Cameroon who may want to pop in and see your latest work. But let's start straight away. I mean, you have made art for the humans, the
yeah.
leitmotif of your work.
Yeah.
I found this quite intriguing, art for the humans, as if the humans were kind of a species, and of course they are. But, let's start with that and let's look at that a little bit more closely, because of course it's quite a contentious idea, the humans, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of people out there who would like to distinguish or differentiate between different kinds of humans. I mean, what exactly do you mean by art for the humans? Who are these humans, and why do you focus on them?
Um, Thank you, Nico. I'm very happy to be in this to be um, um, your guest. Uh, I'm a French speaker. I just try to express myself in English. Um, about your question, it's a notion, a concept that's very important to what I do and what I believe in. It's a kind of utopia, that have decided to follow this uh, uh, notion to art of the humans. If you don't mind, Nico, I think it's important to know where this expression comes from.
Oh, yes, please.
Perhaps, yeah, thank you. Perhaps telling how I came across it will answer all the questions it has raised. In 2018, I was invited to take part in the African Biennale of Contemporary Art, Dakar, held in Dakar, in Senegal. For me, it was a kind of industrialization of art. The art didn't cross paths. Everything was uh, oversized,
Hmm.
very big, you know. Uh, a year later, I was included in the official list of for the African Biennale of Photography, we call Les Rencontres de Bamako, which took place in Bamako, in Mali. I didn't want to have the same experience as in Senegal. So I avoid all the official venue of the Biennale. I hung out and lead with the local photographers. During this period, I wrote about my stay on social networks and signed all my publication with the phrase "Et si on essayait l'humain?" that means why not try the human? Well, with my photographer friends from Yamaru Photo, Yamaru Photo, a collective of Malian photographers, a dynamic collective. I love these guys very much. I did a number of projects in the neighborhoods with people who don't always have access to contemporary art, you know. Sometimes I was ecstatic, but very ecstatic. Um, I remember sometimes I cried because I was so happy to be with my friends and people in the neighborhood. Uh, and over time, the question, what if we tried the human, became art for the humans? I realized this when I worked with my friend Ismaili, I think about Abdul Karim Diallo, Gani Sissoko, Sidiki Aidara, Moussa Tolo, um, and the magnificent Seydou Kamara, the collective's coordinator. They helped me understand that the human being must be at the center of everything. And over time, I've learned that this human being is not limited to human beings alone, but includes everything with life and everything that can be given life. That was art for the human is all about.
It's really a very interesting idea, and I think in an age that is really at a at a huge risk of becoming totally dehumanized with like loads of wars going on, famine, poverty, a lot of suffering all around the world,
Yeah.
and not too much compassion really when you think about it, or very
Mhm.
selective compassion. We all have compassion for some humans but not for others. So
Mhm.
there's that. So I think this is a really it's a really interesting and a really kind of important idea. But when
Mhm.
you say the human, I mean, for me, there's two sides to it. There is the sort of the biology, the human being as a sort of a mammal, like as a species. But then there
Yeah.
is something that has to do with our humanity, which is
Yeah.
more like to do with a set of values or beliefs, rather than with sort of our biology or our physical existence.
Mm.
But of course, you cannot really separate the two out entirely, can you? I mean, the two in a way still go together. Because for one, once our physical existence is threatened, our humanity very often goes out of the window. So there is a strong link between well-being and between a sense of security and ultimately happiness,
Yeah.
and human or humanity. A very positive correlation in some respect. Can you elaborate
Yeah.
a little bit on that interrelationship between the human condition, and the kind of if you like, the kind of the political context within which the kind of
Mm.
human you're talking about can prosper?
Mm.
The
Yeah.
kind of, in other words, what kind of world are you envisaging for those humans to be
Yeah. But
humans?
yeah. Um, I think um we become a humans, you know, and me humans, it's very important to put on this word emotions. When humans don't have emotions, I don't think it's it's a humans, you know. And in my hope about this world is every humans have many emotions. Compassion is a very good emotions, because when you have a compassion um, for somebody, you can help, you can do a bad thing, uh, at this person. I think it's very important. We have a compassion.
It's interesting, it's like compassion, and there's been some
Yeah.
research on this, and often people assume that, well, there's compassionate people, and then there's
Yeah.
kind of psychopaths, and there's or whatever, there's people who are not compassionate.
Yeah.
But actually, it happens to be a case of compassion is something you can learn it. You can learn. If children have a particular kind of education, they
Mm.
can become compassionate human beings. At the same
Yeah.
time, if you
Mm.
desensitize humans, they lose over time, they lose their compassion. And we have seen this in authoritarian context regimes,
Mm.
where kind of, through populist movements and
Mm.
brutality and cruelty, a desensitizing took hold of wide swathes of society, and these societies lost on
Yes.
most their compassion. So in a way, for art in a way, and if I get you correctly here,
Mm.
your art is in part about us rediscovering our compassion. Is that a fair statement?
Mm. Mm. Compassion, yes, is very important to us to be a sensitive, uh, and now we lost this emotion in the world because we have a fear when you you can um you can know something or some people, and I can take for example the immigration, all around the world. We have now a nationalism everywhere in the European. You have many more nationalism, and persons, these peoples create a fear in other people, and um, I think compassion loss like this, like this, and me in my art, I just uh, try to be to take a place of these people um, uh, 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 who can't express her her pain, or we can tell um, the whole story, and I just take this story and relate in relate in my own sensitivity.
I mean, there's kind of two principal parties, if you like,
Yeah.
to your work, isn't there? There's, if you like, the subject of your work, the people you make art about, and in a way you give voice to their dreams and to their life and to the conditions they're in. But then there's also the audience that will engage with your art later, that will look at it and maybe sort of like evaluate it critically, maybe write about it. So there's the sort of the reception side of it, and then there's of course the kind of the creative, the makers kind of side of it. And it's an interesting kind of thing. There's many artists who would say they don't really, and it's quite obvious that you care about your subject. And so, but what I kind of wonder, because you say art for the humans, so
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you're talking here, at least to a certain extent, about your audience.
Mhm.
So it's art for a particular audience, an audience that considers itself human, or that you consider human. Is that a fair statement? Because I mean, a lot of artists don't really care who looks at their work or who buys it or you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But you seem to be quite clear about your target audience. You say my art is for
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful thing, because of course not every artist really appreciates their audience. In fact,
Okay.
I know a number of artists who hate their audience.
Yeah. No, it's very important to me to know my audience, the people for who I do my art, you know. I hope because I hope my art is very engaged on my society, and I it's very important to me to know that my audience um, understand what I do, and I hope to my heart sensibilize my audience, and help my audience to be a better people. Yeah.
I mean, it's probably fair to say that we're living through quite difficult times. Indeed, I did a podcast about 6 months ago with an old collaborator of mine, an old friend of mine, a philosopher and composer based in Belfast, Keith McVeigh, and he is quite into Dadaism. And so we did a podcast around his kind of Dadaist approach to art, and specifically, Hugo Ball is a big figure in his life. And
Yeah.
Hugo Ball sort of writes about what he calls the humiliating age, which is an
Mm.
interesting kind of idea that we're being humiliated by the times that we need to confront.
Mm.
And there's something when you say you make art for the humans, it's kind of almost like a saying that you sort of, you know, in a way that you're kind of rejecting that humiliation and that you're focusing your art on those essentially who are ready to receive it. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, yes. I think it's my path. You know, it's very it's my path. And I tell you that for me, humans not be human beings, you know. Everything we get life for me is is a human. You know. I think like this because if you um separe human beings of and maybe nature, you can um, you can be a very um, uh, not good person for nature because you think nature is not a human. Oh, me, I think all this way is a woman is very important to take care of nature, human beings, object, and so on. Yeah.
So this is interesting. So you're sort of saying that, plants, flowers,
Yes.
animals,
Yeah.
indeed things like rocks and natural, forests
Yes.
and
Yeah.
ancient landscapes are
Hmm.
all part of the human.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so, but you are also saying, and I find that interesting, that not all human beings are part
Yeah.
of it. Yeah,
Yes.
that there's human beings who disregard the human or reject the human and
Mm.
or exclude themselves
Mhm.
from the human, and they're not, if you like, part of your definition. So that's a
Yeah.
very, very interesting. Now, there's another concept which you feel very, very strongly about, and that's this notion of resilience. And I
Yeah.
think resilience is a really interesting concept because it is something that we observe over time. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it's one thing to be a human now as we talk and have a conversation,
Yeah.
but to maintain that frame of mind,
Yeah.
and to become a better human and to, over time, requires, I would sort of speculate, requires a certain level of resilience because there
Mhm.
are all kinds of forces, aren't there, who kind of counteract or kind of undermine or erode our human being.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about resilience, what you mean by that, and how that relates to your practice, specifically how that relates to making art for humans.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Nico. I I read this questions, and I write a little thing, a little statement about it, a little answer about it to be more clear for your audience. Um, okay. I live on a continent and in a country that have experienced many traumas at the hands of the West. We could mention Arab Muslim slavery, transatlantic slavery, colonization, neo-colonization, and I will even say capitalism, which has exploded or our ancestral social and economic structures. We are living in an area where Africa is the object of much covetousness on the part of the world's great powers, Russia, China, France, and so on. I'm convinced that these great powers, in order to avoid a war of raw materials, will agree to aggressively penetrate the African markets. We saw this happen at the Berlin conference in the past, when when the imperialists shared out my continent without inviting us to the festivities. History has a nasty habit to repeating itself. So we need to be at the table when the next division takes place. So we owe it to ourselves to mourn our traumas. We owe it to ourselves to stop behaving like victims just to make our former tormentors feel guilty. For the Africa of today, we have a duty to be resilient. The resilience means knowing our history well and writing about it without any complexes, and if necessary, inventing our own in order to build an Africa of the present, an Africa without complexes. This is uh, uh, um, my relation. This is the importance of resilience on my statement like artist.
So let's talk a little. I mean, this is I love that, and thank you very much that you have prepared that as a sort of as a text, because I think that works really well, and it really kind of gets across a lot of what you want to say. Now, let's talk a little bit about historical guilt, and the strategies of provoking guilt. You mentioned that in your text. And that you believe, if I understand you correctly, that this is a sort of a dead end, that this doesn't actually, although it might feel good right now, it doesn't actually really help, your country or the African continent. What you're saying you need is a forward-looking attitude that essentially looks at Europeans, North Americans, at essentially the kind of the developed world as equal partners and demands to be treated in that way. Isn't that so rather than sort of kind of going on about the past, which we'll come back to that because the past still matters. So we're not sort of saying forget about the past, but in terms of plotting the future, it requires a certain level-headedness and a different approach. Isn't that what you're saying?
Yes. It's very yes. This is the question on this approach to resilience. The importance of this approach is resilience. We need a different future. The future of Africa. We need to be a very different of the present we live now, and for this future is important that African to be resilient, because if we don't do our resilience, but we continue to try about slavery, colonization. I don't ask to forget this past, no, but it's very important to continue to fight about a good future for our sound, and yes, this is very important to me to use a resilience on this approach, yeah.
Resilience.
Mm.
Let's talk a little bit about this idea of resilience and what that sort of means to you. I mean, resilience
Yeah,
has a number of elements to it, doesn't it? I mean, on the one hand, resilience means sort of a steadfastness, in the face of, resistance. So
yeah,
resilience means that you can keep going,
mm,
even though there's a lot of kind of headwinds and there's a lot of kind of forces sort of trying to
mm,
undermine you or erode you or something. Isn't that's one aspect of resilience, isn't it? Is sort of a
yes,
kind of an
mm,
ability to almost go against the current if you have to,
yes,
and not to kind of be worn down or like stopped by that.
mm,
Um, there is sort of another aspect to resilience which has to do with a continuous renewal,
yeah,
in a way,
yes,
because of course nobody, I mean, it doesn't, it does affect, I mean, everybody's situation, context, political,
yeah,
social, economic,
mhm,
affects their perspective, and
yes,
so on and so forth. And it wears people down, or it kind of gives them an advantage and all the rest. And
mm,
unless, if you are sort of in a game of catch up, if you are, developing kind of context, then you
mhm,
kind of, it's kind of catching up. It's a very, very, it's an extra thing you have to do, isn't it? Is in addition to kind of be sort of like at eye level, you also have to still catch up. And there's a tension between where you have to get to
yeah,
and at the same time what you already have to do. So
mhm.
and so resilience in a way kind of deals with that. Can you talk a little bit about the different forces at play that make resilience an important sort of like attribute or something, an important quality that needs to be fostered?
Yeah, I don't understand, please.
Well, why do you think, why is resilience? I mean, the African context of like Cameroon obviously has a
Mhm,
very different economic context to say Germany or North America or whatever, Australia, you name it, or even
mhm,
China, of course. And so in addition to all the kind of contemporary problems that you would have if you were as developed as Germany, France, and the rest, you have the additional burden of having to catch up and having to deal with the deficits that like economic deficits,
yes,
poverty, inequality, and
mhm,
so forth, the disease,
mm,
the impact of climate change, and so on and so on. And you have
mm.
to deal with all of that, and at the same time, sort of defend that seat at the table. So can you talk a little bit about the different forces, the different, that in a way make resilience such an important element of self-defense, if you like, or such an important strategic characteristic or thing that you need to cultivate specifically from an African perspective? Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about, yeah?
Okay, yes, yes. I think African have a lot of resilience, a lot more African, but Africans people by definition are the resilience people, because we have a lot of trauma, but we stay strong. We have a flexible like this, like this, uh, 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 in front of wine, like this, and is this characteristic of African permit African to I I don't like this word, but it's a good is the comment je vais dire ça this word is very appropriate, but I don't like it. If Africans not be resilient, African maybe disappear. I can take for example immigration. Immigration. I can take, for example, climate change. You know, in Europe, you have a lot of law and yeah, a lot of law to protect the nature, to um, to facilitate, make to make a life comfortable. But in Africa, in my country, it's very important to be specific. Specific in my country. I don't have this um, disposition to protect the, um, the nature, you know. China people, for example, came and destroyed the vegetation, forest, and not and these people don't fear about a law because corruption, etc., etc. But African people the continue to exist because we are very resilient. Yes, this is the specification, the very specific thing to happen in my country.
You're using two words, and
Yeah,
I'm not saying you're using them interchangeably, but you use both. And I would like to know where you see the difference between that. Resilience, you say Africans are very resilient,
yeah,
but you've also said Africans are very strong. What is
yeah.
the difference between strength and resilience? Is it the same thing for you, or is there a difference between strength and resilience?
No, I think if you need to be resilient, you need to be strong too, you know, because when you know during a long time your ancestors uh, um, turned for slavery, when you know your your history is not right by you or your people, when you know, you can decide to go where you like because you don't have a good passport. You know, you need to be strong and you need to be resilient.
Now,
But resilience can work without a strong, you know.
Now,
Yeah,
let's talk about strength for a moment, because I kind of agree that you need a certain strength
yeah,
for resilience to take hold.
mm,
But where does this strength come from? And that leads us on to the next topic, I think, to the topic of memory.
yeah,
And also the topic of vision and ideas about the future. It's kind of a sense of where we are, like in time and space, isn't it? If we have a strong sense of time and space, of the past, the future, and the present,
mm,
and if we can reconcile, that, then that's a tremendous source of strength, isn't it? And I mean, and we see this for good and for bad. I mean, we see. I mean, I see it in Germany when politicians insist on things being done in a really harmful way because we have always done it this way. So the
okay,
kind of the notion, the sense of tradition and continuity becomes a source of strength, and in some ways also a sort of resilience, but not necessarily always in the right way. I mean, there are
yeah,
harmful systems also that are highly resilient,
yeah,
and they're hard to kind of to change.
mm,
But resilience is in itself neither good nor bad. But of course, we need it to stay the course.
yeah,
And so, but the link between strength, or our sense of being strong,
yeah,
and our sense of memory of where we come from, including, and I will come to that later, sort of ancestral memory, and that whole idea of culture and heritage, in a way that kind of that it plays into it, doesn't it? So maybe just as a transition, could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how you see that sort of historical memory and cultural memory somehow strengthens people and helps them to become more resilient?
Yeah. Yes. This strong or strength is a strong mentality, and to be the relation of memory is if you want to be a resilient, I think you need to know your history. You need to know your ancestor memory, because this history is and memory is very, very um, powerful. It's very powerful, and this powerful can help us to be resilient. I want to comment on dit ça? Uh, 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 to tell you a one story I live. One day I go on the west region in my country to visit one village we call Batufam. In this village, every 8 years, every 8 days, we move all uh, king attributes, and ask for the king, my dear king, on 7 day on the past, what are you do for your people, you know? And many years after, I have a residence at the at Marseille in France, and with artists, we talk about the democracy, politics, and one artist, a French artist, tell me, uh, democracy in your country is don't exist. We are a dictator because your president, and I relate of my friend, French artist, uh, the story I tell you, and this artist tell me, it's amazing. This is a real practice of democracy, and I have this practice so many years on my country, and now when I know this story, I can be resilient. Okay, I can be resilient because this memory gives me a word in my culture. Maybe in Africa, we tell that somebody somebody have a word if he knows memory. If you don't know memory, you can speak. You can speak. And it's very, very, it's a great lesson for me when I know this words in my country. I think that memory, when you look memory on this path, you understand that it's very important to concept to save and take care of this memory. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that the conservation of memory
Yeah.
and its transmission to future generations is very much at the core of your practice as an artist. Because of course, one aspect of memory work, if you like, is interpretation. I mean, memory, there's not a kind of a generalized memory. there's as many memories as there are humans, isn't there? And everybody has their own memory. In some cases, that memory is more fuzzy. It's not so clear. It's nebulous. It's, other people have a crystal clear but
Yeah.
somewhat twisted memory. They
Yes.
have an
Yes.
interpretation that is kind of somehow very selective. So
Yeah.
memory is a kind of a contested field.
Mm,
And of course, the artist has a kind of a central role to
mm,
play in kind of mediating and in a way transmitting memory
mm.
and preserving and transmitting memory to future generations.
Yes.
How is that reflected in very practical terms in your work as an artist? How do you preserve and transmit
Yeah.
memory in your art?
Yeah, I agree with you on many position. I think that the memory I defend on my work is not a memory about a past. No, because I think in the present we construct a memory, and it's very important to mix memory in the past and memory in a present memory. So I think it's not the how to tell this. It's not the Afrocentrist memory, no, because I think me now, I have a collision of West memory, and this collision gives me a lot of comment on dit savoir, a lot of uh, gi give me 1 second is important to know this a lot of knowledge when I when my existence in like African it, enter in collision with the West a West wall, this collision gives me a knowledge, you know. Is very important to me to not forget this memory too. Donc, you have a present memory of African in collision of West memory or another world memory, and you have a specific memory of African you have in the past. Now, in my works, I try to associate these two memories. And for the past, I've tried to take the traditions, uh, maybe the lost traditions, and try to mix, to propose these traditions on the to exist in my contemporary. I take one example. A few years, I have a residence at Benin and the space we call Le Centre. And during this residence, artistic residence, I saw one magnific ritual we call Masque Gelédé. The Masque Gelédé is the ritual we have, it's a common ritual between Benin, uh, um, Nigeria, and Togo. And this ritual um, it's like a psychologic, it's the psychologue of the society. When many ways don't mm, work good in the society, we convoke this ritual to resolve this way. And I use this utopia and propose to resolve the problems, the contemporary problems like the uh, like a terrorism, Islamic terrorism, to tell that we can put this mask gelede on the city and do okay. It's very it's not the terrorism is not good and it's over. You know, we resolve the problem in Africa like this so many years in the past. This is a one approach to memory. And now to the present memory, in my work, I'm very interested about all crises who exist in my country or my continent. I work during 4 years on the Islamic attack on the north on my country, Boko Haram. And I do one major exhibition on my career of this work. I go um, mm, to s- to see the people who attacked by the Boko Haram, and I discussed with these people. Um, Comment on dit ça? I read the testimony, yeah, of these people and put it on my walls. Some years, in northwest of southwest in my country, we have a crisis, but it's the war. But politics call it a crisis, but I think it's the war. And this war opposite the Anglophone people, the English speaker on this country of of the government, and I decide to go to see the IDP, the intern displaced person, IDP, about this war. I go in the project. In the project, I do this work in the five towns in Cameroon. I begin by Yaoundé, the politic capital of Cameroon, and I go to see internal displaced person, and I rec the testimony. I do the photo, and I put all these records on one comment on appelle ça? Site internet, website online, because it's very important for me. Every person in the world, every Cameroonian in the world, African or West person, to have a testimony of this person, because in my country, I think media and government media don't speak don't speak truth about the way in to pass in the southwest and northwest region, and me, I go to to origin and take a word of this person and save this word for the future generation. Because if I don't do this work, West media come do this work and go with this work on the West. And when my daughter, she has 10 years old now, when in the future she decides to uh, uh, um, do a research about this war, she want to have a visa. If we if we give her the visa, she want to go and pay to have an archive about this war, you know, and this future is my present. If I want to know the things or truth about colonization or slavery period on Africa, I ask a visa. You know, no, is this is my contribution about a memory, about a memory.
I totally get that, Yvon.
Yeah,
I totally get that. I mean, in fact, one of the main reasons why I'm doing these dialogues, the annotations dialogues, is
yeah,
exactly that, is to build up an
okay,
archive of
yeah,
narratives.
yeah,
Because we are going through a really, I think, future generations in like 20, 30, 50 years time, they'll be looking back at this time, and yeah, there will be massive variations locally. I mean, the problems in a place like Berlin are so fundamentally different from the problems in, Douala or where else, but they aggregate into kind of a global crisis.
yeah,
And we're part of the same, the same earth, the same planet.
yes,
And the kind of energy and our mindset and the way we approach development locally, nationally, globally at the moment, we fundamentally threaten, undermine the existence, the kind of the very basis of life on this planet. And I think over the next 10 years we have a choice. We have a choice,
yeah,
both as artists, but also as politicians, and in every trade and in every profession. In fact, we have a choice to do something
yeah,
about this and
yeah.
in a way, position ourselves and to tell our story and to contribute to a better present and thus also to a better future.
Yes, right.
I absolutely, totally get that. Now, there's another aspect about memory, which I think also really matters a great deal to you, but it gets us back to this whole sort of neo-colonial discourse. And this is the whole thing really about the restitution of African art objects, or more
Yeah.
broadly speaking, about theft, about sort
Mm,
of like, because it's not just about restitution, it's about theft. I mean, let's be honest,
mm,
it's about and of course there's something inherently wrong about this. There's no question, so I mean, I steal something from you, you should have it back, and I should somehow be penalized for it because I'm not supposed to be stealing from you. No
mm.
question about that. But there's
Yeah,
another aspect to this which I think in a way is more interesting, and this has to do with owning the past. Whose past is it? Who owns that past? And
yeah.
whose memory is, there's this kind of saying, history is written by the winners.
Yes,
uh,
yes.
uh,
Yes.
yeah. So whose memory are we talking about, and who are the custodians of that memory? And I think
Yeah.
that is when it comes to the restitution of African art objects, I think that really, to me, is the central question.
Mm,
There are these kind of legal question and then the moral question about theft, but there is this fundamental question about the theft of memory. And I don't know, you might have some thoughts or opinions on this. So maybe how do you relate to this? What is your kind of stance on that?
Oh, this question is very sensitive question is in my country now. Um, Germany, French organized these last years many um, talk, comment on appelle ça? Put artists together to speak about the restitution and so on. But this this timing on this process, African uh, not not West don't associate African, you know. I try to explain this. West decide to restitute. West don't think to ask, apologize to many suffering this comment on appelle, many suffering African life because West took these objects, because West saw that objects like art, like yes, these objects is very important for my culture. It's the spiritual objects, you know. It's not just aesthetic. No, it's very important. No, never West come and ask apologize. I think is a very, very unrespect unrespect a situation for African, firstly. And secondly, the question about restitution put on the place in other questions, because when West took the different objects and go with these objects on the Europa, America, and so on, these objects, these spiritual objects, go in this place and so another spiritual place, because in the Europa you have a spiritual too, spiritual way too. And when you come and give us these objects, maybe these objects don't recognize us because is a go in the another spiritual area, you know. Donc, I think maybe African think that we have to do another ceremony, another ritual to accept these objects.
I mean, it's, yeah.
And I want just to finish, I want to speak about this thing too, because for this the different objects, for example, French accept to restitute at Benin. French decide what objects to give the Benin. Oh, in France don't accept the selection of Benin. I think it's not good relation about this restitution. But if you ask me, Yvon, are you agree to restitution? I say yes. I say yes, because these objects is very important to Africa, to Africa. And I think that if this object return on Africa, this object is, comment je vais dire ça, appartient, this object is for world, you know. This what I can say about this. Yeah, this is my position.
Yeah, I mean, you've been using the word spiritual
Yeah.
in describing this object. I would suggest that probably a better term would be sacred. I'm saying that because spiritual has, primarily, or it's essentially religious, whereas sacred has a cultural dimension to it. For example, there's sort of sacred objects in Germany that are not religious at all. They relate to other aspects of German identity.
Please excuse me, Nico. I want to something come in my memory now. I think it's very important, because for this, the thing, comment je vais dire ça? You know, West took the objects and go with that objects. It's the way is very, very difficult for our African and the present African too, because when you speak about contemporary art, you know, we don't have the the objects to imagine another aesthetic. We don't have these objects because the objects go to West. This operation, this European operation can do that. Art in Africa don't exist, you know, because all go to Europa. Unfortunately, we have some people like Picasso to took that object and create about this object a new aesthetic and so on. So I think it's very um, this question of restitution is very sensitive question and but it's very important to speak about it and take a good decision about it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Mm.
I mean, I guess when I started off sort of introducing that topic, I was sort of saying that there's this aspect of theft. And there's sort of a legal dimension and a sort of, if you like, a moral dimension to this idea that, we shouldn't be stealing anybody. Nobody should be stealing stuff from other people. And of course, if this is done en masse, like as a kind of systemic kind of theft, and the way it happened during the colonial times, then it's
Yeah.
even worse. There's absolutely no question about that. Now, the problem, of course, is the kind of the discourse or in Europe and in North America isn't really a
Mm.
cultural one. It's a legalistic one. So it's all about provenance. It's about establishing whether this was actually rightfully sold at the time when it left the country, or whether it was taken, whether it was stolen. And if it was
Yeah.
sold, then apparently it's okay. So that's the idea.
Mm.
If the previous African owner got money for it, or some other kind of exchange value, then
Yeah.
it's okay. But if it was
Yeah.
stolen, it isn't. And I think that is too simplistic, because the issue isn't so much. Of course, there is this legalistic dimension to it, but there is another, and
Mhm.
this is, I think, what you've really kind of been focusing on, another dimension. Look, if these objects are displayed in a German museum, they are objects of curiosity. We do not relate to them in any substantive way, because to us, they're alien, they're interesting, they're different, but they're not part of our kind of culture. So at best, they amuse, they entertain us. And of course, they allow us to tell a story about European superiority and about us Europeans going to Africa or other parts of the world and
Yeah.
essentially documenting, archiving, and preserving their history. you know, um,
Yeah.
and so that's the story, and that's essentially. And I think this is where the kind of the discourse needs to change.
Mm.
Because it isn't so much, for me, it isn't so much a question of whether an object 300 years ago was sold because the owner was so poor and so desperate, or maybe forced to sell, who knows. I mean let's be honest. This is something, when people go on about, oh, this was sold, well, this must be legit. Well, actually, so many businesses and art by Jewish people were sold in
Yeah.
the 1930s in Germany. And of course, these Jews didn't sell that voluntarily, and certainly not
Yeah.
at a price that would
Mm.
reflect market value. No, they basically had to flee, or they had to somehow deal with a kind of a very threatening fascist regime. And yeah, they sold their art, they sold their businesses. But
Yeah.
hey, what is that? And I think there is a sort of an equivalence there. And I don't want to, most people don't want that equivalence or want to see that, but there is a sort of a kind of a parallel, certainly, in a sense that,
Okay.
during
Mm.
colonial times, even if it was sold, the
Yes.
circumstances under which it was sold, I think, are still really need to be looked at. And of course, the
Yes.
other main issue is use value. I mean, what
Mm.
value is it to us in Europe versus what value is it to you in Cameroon or anywhere else in Africa? And so I think this is a discussion to be had. And by the way, the reason why Germany and the UK and France and all the rest and Portugal don't really want to apologize is because they don't want to be held liable. This is all about
Yeah.
money again, you know, because the
Yeah.
moment they apologize, admit fault or some kind of wrongdoing,
Mhm.
and they open up, you know, to litigation, and that's why they don't want to do it. It's all about that. I
Yeah.
think there is a genuine sense, and certainly I can speak for my circle in Europe, of people who do feel that, you know, like a solution needs to be developed and needs to be found.
Mm.
I think the current situation is not sustainable, and I'm not sure for how much longer people will want to look at these objects and feel good about them here in Europe. I think people
Mm.
are increasingly feeling that they're looking at something that shouldn't be here.
Mm.
But that's just my own personal thing on that. Now, uh, this has been really, really interesting, and I hope that we can continue that dialogue,
Mm.
you know, and stay in touch.
Yes.
You know, you are, you know, obviously one of those pioneers, like a practicing artist in Africa. You know, against all odds, the kind of economic difficulties, you name it, everything, you know, and you're still doing it. And you're not the only artist in Africa. There is
Mm.
many artists, and they do need and they demand a voice globally as well. And they do. They have a voice. You have a voice, and so on and so forth. But there is a younger generation of artists coming up. And I wonder what kind of advice would you have to sort of budding Cameroonian artists, young
Mm.
people, or don't
Mm.
have to be young, but people who basically toy with this idea,
Mm.
seriously consider a career in the arts. What would you say to them?
Uh, I think the first thing I want to say to them is the um, to take care about a market, art market too. Art market is very dangerous thing, you know. Art market do uh, um, it try to homogenize the production, to homogenize the aesthetic of African art, you know, and it's very dangerous thing now in my country, for example, and I want to say it's very important these young artists to be connect of um, them uh, history and story, you know, because if I can do a narrative, I can tell something about a world. Uh, 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 um, I can do this because I know I come from with my story. You know, when I go uh, to uh, to to Copenhagen, I come with my story. I come speak about the patriarchal, no, patriarch about a colonization in the a small village we call Lulodorf. I come and do this narrative at Copenhagen. If I come at Paris and speak about Eiffel Tower, it's not be interested, you know. No, this is my advice. It's very important to tell about the thing who live in my in own country. Yes, it's very important to participate of the world. Yeah, this is
There's another aspect which tends to be quite important in Europe, and I wonder whether this is also important in Cameroon and in Africa. It
yeah.
can be a very lonely practice being an artist.
Mm.
You know, and so it tends to be quite important to build networks, to find like-minded people, to team up with others, and maybe even to form a school or
yeah,
sort of a school of thought, a movement.
yeah.
Is that something that you would consider important in the kind of Cameroonian context as well? How do artists in Cameroon organize? Are they kind of everybody for their own, or do you find that there's kind of clusters and groups and networks, and how important do you think that is?
We have a fine art school. We have different collective to try to uh, organize the exhibition, workshops, and so on. And but we don't have materials, good materials to uh, to do a great project. We need a money to produce. Uh, uh, for example, the work I do about intern displaced person uh, in Northwest and Southwest in my country is a large project. One party of the project is to edit a book, you know, because I don't find a money to produce to edit this book. So maybe I can do this finally. You know, this is the different problems we have in my country. Yeah. But artists is very resilient. You know, artists in my country is very resilient and with small small thing we try to do a big thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's the spirit. In
Yes.
fact, I mean, the situation in Europe is somewhat obviously different. There's, if you are a particular type of artist, or if you kind of go with the flow, or if you're sort of in the in crowd, then there can be quite a lot of money around in Europe
Yeah.
and also North America.
Yeah.
If you go against the current, if you're trying to do work that is kind of in some ways possibly even kind of criticizing or attacking the status quo, and then that money dries up pretty quickly in Europe as well. And so there's certain aspects or certain, areas where there is a significant level of censorship as well in Europe and in Germany as well. One area, of course, is anything to do with Israel and Judaism and the current situation in the Middle East.
Mm.
It's actually almost, you have to be very careful to remain on the legal side of things in Germany, and people
Yeah.
are being put away. And this is really, it hasn't happened in the past so much, but it's now
Okay.
becoming more authoritarian in Europe as well. So there is um, in my way of looking at it, there's a need to kind of start to think about art that doesn't rely too much on external resources, that doesn't rely
Mm.
too much on funding, an
Mhm.
art that is partially shaped by those constraints in a way,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because it makes also, there was a movement in Italy in the 1960s, 70s, art povere or poor art.
Yeah. Yeah.
And art
Yes.
povere, of course,
Very. Yeah.
the kind of the core of it was essentially to work with found objects. And
Mhm.
the moment you want to be a Jeff Koons and you want to
Yes.
basically spend gazillions on some shiny object that you're going to sculpt
Mm.
or let somebody else sculpt for you, at that
Yes.
point, at that moment, you rely on funding. You rely on somebody else to kind of give you permission to do it,
Mm.
and the art will reflect that. And so there is a thing about making art that kind of gets around the permissions
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah.
And the situation, of course, in Cameroon is very different, very, very different from the situation in Europe or in Germany specifically.
Yeah.
But there are certain common strategies that we can adopt and where we can exchange ideas,
Mhm.
how to do work under difficult circumstances, how to resist,
Yeah.
how to rebel, against certain developments. And when we start to think as rebels and we start to think as activists, then
Yeah.
these strategies that we and that you can apply, they begin to merge in
Yeah.
some interesting way. So I think we need to have more of this dialogue and talk
Yeah.
about, you know,
Yes.
making art, you know, in these really adverse times, which are
Yes.
kind of different for different reasons in your part of the world from mine. But we all face difficulties, and how do we make art that isn't making itself dependent on those power structures?
Yeah.
So that's really. I'd like to finish on that. And thank
Yeah.
you very, very much for
Thank you too,
coming on.
Nico.
Now we had obviously we had that short kind of time when you were offline. I'm gonna edit that out and it'll hardly be seen. But
Okay.
apart from that, I just I tend to only clip it at the beginning and the end to make
Yeah.
it contain it. And I think
Okay.
it's been a really good conversation we've had.
Thank you. Thank you.
It worked well, you know, and I understood everything and
Yeah.
I feel so privileged that we've been able to do this. Thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you too, Nico. Thank you too. I'm very happy to have this discussion with you. Thank you.